Hello, folks. I'm Josh McGee, and welcome to another episode of the Gateway to Soccer Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, like I said last week, we are moving at a fast and furious pace here in the soccer calendar. The great thing about this past week was there was great, meaningful soccer on every day, and that's how it's going to be here for the foreseeable future, which means we have a lot to get to on this episode. I'll be talking with a great, familiar guest here in just a little bit about one specific aspect of U.S. soccer. As far as the home studio for this week, I put up a couple jerseys that I haven't put up in a little while. Over here, my third alternate jersey for the U.S. from a few years ago. And over here, of course, my home Argentina jersey. But the big thing is what I am wearing. Who would have thought all those years ago on a hot summer night at Busch Stadium when Chelsea and Manchester City played each other that they would be playing in a Champions League final? The date for that matchup at Busch Stadium, May 23rd, 2013. And of course, these two teams will be playing each other in the Champions League final this year on May 29th. So some crazy parallels there. We're going to get to that matchup here in just a few seconds. But I want to start off this episode with another important conversation about some of the events of this past week in world soccer. And I want to start off by making this point. There are a lot of problems in society, which is a deeper conversation for another day, but also in sports that need fixing. However, these problems can't be fixed in a day, and they can't be fixed in a conventional way. And unfortunately, there are certain issues that we can't just wait around to be fixed. When action isn't taken on these issues, or it's not taken quickly enough, you have the option to protest. Unfortunately, there is no playbook on protesting. There is no 5-step plan that gets you what you want every single time. If there was an easy way to protest, everyone would be doing it. But unfortunately, there is just no blueprint for it. However, the main thing that has to be a part of every protest is that they can't be hollow. You have to continue to fight for what you want and what change you want to see. Unfortunately, there were a couple of major protests from this past week that kind of fell a little bit more on the hollow side, or at least from an outside fan's perspective. The first one was Manchester United fans protesting outside of Old Trafford ahead of their big match versus Liverpool, demanding that the Glazer family sell the club, much like Arsenal fans did with Stan Kroenke just a few weeks ago. Fans would eventually push past security and enter the grounds of the stadium, occupying it for some time before police were able to get control of the situation. The match was postponed to a later date. Now, frustration with ownership in Manchester is well warranted. They haven't been a big-time player in the Champions League recently. They haven't won the Premier League in a while. And just overall, player transfers, things of that nature. And of course, this recent Euro Super League business, they got a lot to be unhappy about with their club and with the owners there in Manchester. And fans were able to create a lot of buzz with this protest. They were able to get the match postponed, which was probably a thorn in the side to the club and especially to broadcasters who were anticipating a really big match this past weekend. However, the match will still go on at some point, and this incident probably had little to do with influencing a potential sale. The only way to influence owners into selling the club without them shooting themselves in the foot, because we've seen that a lot here in American sports, is to hurt them where it matters most, is to hurt them in their wallet. Not buying tickets, not buying merchandise, and etc. Unfortunately, that method punishes the fans and it punishes the players at those clubs more so than it does the owners. You can't blame fans for wanting to see the team, for wanting to see the club be a part of something, to continue to support the club that they've been doing so for years. And unfortunately, when you do that, it helps out the owners. So there's no real, consistent, easy way to protest in that form that doesn't punish the people who matter the most, the fans and of course the players at those clubs. The best thing for supporters to do right now is to continue to put pressure on ownership, to continue to have a presence from week to week with their protests. They can't afford to let this stuff slide. And like we've seen with Arsenal, we've seen a couple of names being speculated as being part of a potential new ownership group. That's what's got to happen with Manchester United. You have to have a couple people step up and be potential bidders. That's the only way that you could potentially get things to change and have the Glazers sell the club. But unfortunately for right now, there's just not an easy way to get that type of change at the moment for these fans. So that all went down on Sunday. The other major protest actually began a couple days before when the English Premier League and all of its clubs instituted a self-imposed boycott of social media for at least a couple of days over the ongoing increase of racial online harassment for Black players in the UK. Now, the matches still went ahead as planned, but you wouldn't really know about some of the action unless you were watching because clubs weren't posting about things on Twitter or on Facebook. It would have been a really cool protest if it hadn't been overshadowed by more racial incidents from this past week. It started on Tuesday when, during the Champions League semifinal match between PSG and Manchester City, after Angel Di Maria had been sent off, CBS and EPL commentator Jim Beglin attributed Di Maria's outburst to that Latino temperament. Beglin apologized on air a few moments later and then released a longer statement a little bit later on social media. Another incident, former Arsenal Invincible goalkeeper Jens Lehmann was sacked by Hertha Berlin after it was revealed that he had sent a racist message this past week to a pundit. Unfortunately, also elsewhere, Raheem Sterling from Manchester City was once again abused on Instagram just a couple of hours after the club's Champions League victory versus PSG. So this is what I'm talking about when I say that protests can't be hollow. Obviously, the social media blackout is a nice gesture, much like instituting that players kneel before each English Premier League match. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, it's really just a symbolic gesture. It does little to push back on the deeply rooted problem of racism in world football. If a commentator can say something on national TV like Beglin did, what's going to stop these anonymous fans on social media posting just these horrible racist messages targeting players? The only way that this is going to stop is if clubs are held accountable and strict punishment comes to these specific people. That's the only way. You got to put some action behind these protests. Otherwise, fans are just going to continue to get away with this type of stuff. This is a really pivotal time in the world football calendar. We're approaching the end of the European domestic season. There's going to be a lot of big matches played here over the next few weeks. In a month's time, we've got the European Championships, the biggest event of the summer. It would be really cool if the likes of FIFA, UEFA, and some of the other biggest clubs around the world came up with some plans and some action that were just a little bit more symbolic to help combat these issues. Unfortunately, if that's not the case, things are just going to continue to remain the same. There's not going to be much change. And especially when fans come back to the stands, we're going to be right back where we started on these issues. So that was the important stuff that happened off the pitch from this past week. Now let's get to how we ended up with yet another All-English Premier League Champions League final. It started on Tuesday when, under tough weather conditions, Manchester City advanced to their first ever Champions League final by beating PSG 2-0 and advancing on aggregate by a score of 4-1. After a PSG penalty was justifiably overturned by VAR, Man City got on the board in the 11th minute through a beautiful move that started off with a great long ball from the goalkeeper Ederson. The ball would eventually find Kevin De Bruyne in the box where his shot would be blocked, but Riyad Mahrez was able to pounce on the rebound and fire home his shot for the opener. After PSG started the match strong, City's defense were able to put the clamps on them, and they were able to get their second goal in the 63rd minute through great combination play on the break between De Bruyne and Phil Foden, whose cross would find a wide open Mahrez at the back post, who was able to smash home his shot for the second goal of the match. PSG's frustration boiled over in the 69th minute when Fernandinho was able to go Di Maria into stomping on his foot, which is what led to the red card. Despite being on the bench, Kylian Mbappe never featured for PSG in this match due to a calf injury he picked up over the weekend. So there it is. Man City finally make their first ever Champions League final, and they do it on the back of their defense. That's how they've been dominating opponents this season. After the initial 15 minutes or so in that match, PSG never really got going. Of course, it hurts that they didn't have Mbappe for this second leg, but still, there's a lot of talent out there for PSG, but they just couldn't get anything past Ruben Diaz and that City defense. Up top, you had great play from De Bruyne, from Foden, and of course, Mahrez gets the 2 goals here in this match. They controlled it for the most part. And again, at the end, I didn't like the antics. There was a lot of pushing and shoving in this match between both sides. I know, again, Di Maria, he's got to control his temper there. He can't afford to get sent off. But Fernandinho was definitely giving it to him. He was definitely trying to goad him into red card. You can't deny the Brazil versus Argentina rivalry there as well. So that's unfortunate that they kind of stooped to those tactics. But at the end of the day, it was still a very entertaining match. It was a great tie over 2 legs between these clubs. But again, at the end, it just seems like this is City's destiny. This is what they've been working towards over these past few years, especially since Pep Guardiola has taken control of that club. They finally get to that final stage, and we'll have to see if they can finally get over the hump there in the Champions League final. The team that will be opposing Manchester City in that final will be a familiar opponent. While the match was a tight affair for the most part, Chelsea got an early goal from Timo Werner and a late one from Mason Mount to secure a 2-0 victory over Real Madrid and advance to their 3rd ever Champions League final on an aggregate score of 3-1. Eden Hazard started against his former club as Madrid also welcomed back captain Sergio Ramos in defense. Despite controlling the opening moments of the match, Madrid almost went 1-0 down early when Werner put the ball in the net off of a nice cross from Ben Chilwell, but the striker was just a step or so offsides. A few minutes later, Chelsea goalkeeper Edouard Mendy made the first of 2 spectacular saves on the night, palming away a Karim Benzema curling effort at full extension. Chelsea got on the board first in the 28th minute when N'Golo Kante was able to play into the box Kai Havertz. Havertz attempted to chip goalkeeper Thibaut Courtois, but his effort clanged against the crossbar. Luckily for Chelsea, Werner was the first to the rebound, and he was able to head home from point-blank range. After a Benzema header forced another good save from Mendy, Madrid struggled to create chances in this match, while Chelsea were unable to finish off theirs. They created a ton of chances here in this match. It wasn't until the 85th minute when substitute Christian Pulisic was played into the box. Patiently waited for Courtois to commit, much like his goal in the first leg. And then he was able to pick out Mason Mount in the box with the cross, and Mount was able to slot home his attempt for the second goal of the match. Really cool thing here from this result as Chelsea move on to their third Champions League final. Thomas Tuchel became the first manager ever to make back-to-back Champions League finals in consecutive seasons with two different clubs. So again, really cool moment, especially for me as a Chelsea supporter, to see Chelsea make it all the way to the Champions League final. Who would have thought with the beginning of the season that they had the sacking of Frank Lampard, bringing in Tuchel, and now, of course, they are here once again, a familiar formula, much like what happened in 2012 with Roberto Di Matteo. They're obviously going to be facing a formidable opponent in Man City, but the way they've been playing recently, the defense has been spectacular. Mendy in this match was a lifesaver with those couple of saves that he was able to make, but for the most part, the defense were able to shut down all that Madrid threw at them. On the offensive end, really cool to see Werner put one in on such an important match, an important stage here in this tournament. Kai Havertz has been on great form recently. Of course, you've got Christian Pulisic and putting everything together. And then, of course, the midfield. N'Golo Kante winning man of the match in both legs of this tie. It's tremendous to see how he's been playing now that he's fully healthy and what he's been able to contribute and how important he is to this Chelsea team. So, again, a little bit shocking considering that Madrid, their pedigree, what they've been able to do, and just who they are, that they were shut out here in this second tie, needing to score just one really at the beginning to completely flip it. They were unable to do so, and Chelsea pretty comfortably in the end were able to take care of business and advance to the Champions League final. So there you have it, an all-English Premier League final, just like it was a couple seasons ago with Liverpool and Tottenham. We're getting Manchester City versus Chelsea. Obvious storylines on both sides. You got Pep Guardiola and Man City trying to complete that project. The Champions League trophy is really the only thing that they haven't won here under his reign. Can they finally get it done? For Chelsea, it's all about completing this turnaround of a season, bringing in Tuchel, what he's been able to do. Can they somehow come up with this Champions League trophy and repeat that formula from 2012? There's going to be a lot of great, interesting individual matchups. Both defenses have been on fine form. It's going to be a great tactical battle there in the final. But very exciting, of course. And of course, on the other side, the losing side, PSG, a lot of questions with Neymar and Mbappe going forward. Are they going to sign contract extensions, or are PSG going to have to find a different way to build their squad? And with Madrid, a lot of their guys are getting older. You know, Sergio Ramos, Luka Modric, etc. They got a lot of question marks there as well. So we'll have to see going forward in the next year's tournament how those clubs look. But as for right now, the two clubs will be focusing on both playing the English Premier League, as Man City will be playing Chelsea in the Champions League final. So speaking of Premier League teams, I want to provide another update on the Big Five leagues because there was a lot of important results that we need to recap, a lot of big stories that broke, and also a lot of big matches to look forward to here this weekend. Starting with the Premier League, this is a very pivotal week for the EPL. It starts off tomorrow when the Champions League finalists, Manchester City and Chelsea, actually face each other in league play. That match will be on NBC. A couple days later, you're going to have UCL hopefuls, West Ham United and Everton go at it. Then in midweek, you've got Manchester United versus Leicester City, two top four clubs at the moment. You got a London derby between Chelsea and Arsenal. And then that rescheduled match, Manchester United versus Liverpool. So a lot of big matches that are going to determine how those last few spots for the Champions League next season play out. Really interested to see tomorrow, Manchester City versus Chelsea. How much does either manager tip their hand with their lineup, with their strategy in terms of that May 29th date for the Champions League? Excited to see that. Obviously, you've got West Ham and Everton kind of on the outside looking in, but a result there could be vital for either one of them trying to get into the Champions League late on here. Of course, a couple big matches for Manchester United. They also got Aston Villa this weekend. They've got a lot of matches over these next few days. Of course, they got to worry about the Europa League as well. So how do they combat all of that? Again, also Chelsea-Arsenal, derby matchup, and then, of course, that big matchup on Thursday, Manchester United versus Liverpool. So a lot of these results are going to help determine those final few spots in the Champions League. And at the end of the day, though, a lot of big matchups. City versus Chelsea, Chelsea versus Arsenal, United versus Liverpool. Going to be a lot of great soccer here in the EPL over this next week. Moving on to La Liga and the two big showdowns this weekend that will help determine the title race. After both clubs picked up 3 points this past weekend, Atletico Madrid will face off versus Barcelona with the opportunity to go 5 points clear at the top of the table, or if Barcelona win, they will take over first place. Elsewhere, you've got Real Madrid facing Sevilla FC. Madrid trying to keep pace with both of those clubs above them, while Sevilla were dealt a crucial blow to their title race when they lost 1-0 this past Monday to Athletic Bilbao. Still, they've got an opportunity there, and they could obviously take points away from Madrid. So obviously the big matchup is Atletico versus Barcelona. Those are the top 2 clubs in the La Liga table. This could be a type of a match where Atletico bunker down, use their defensive style to their advantage, and try to at least come out of there with a draw. For Barcelona, they're going to have to lean on the individual brilliance of Lionel Messi. They've had a couple players kind of round into form a little bit. Griezmann's been able to put in a couple of goals for Barcelona here over the past couple of weeks. But still, it's going to be really tough, the challenge, and the onus is going to be on Barcelona to break down Atletico. So we'll see if they're able to do it. Madrid, obviously they're coming off of the big loss to Chelsea here in midweek. They're going to have to rally around themselves here and try to come up with 3 points against a tough Sevilla team who are not completely out of the title race yet. So there's still going to be a lot to play for, and they're going to be a tough out. But Real got to pick up 3 points if they want to stick with whoever wins that match between Barcelona and Atletico. So still, going forward, I think the winner, or especially if Madrid are able to tie against Barcelona, will be the favorite in La Liga. But it's going to be a very entertaining race here till the end. But this weekend will go a long way in determining who will win La Liga this season. Next up, the German Bundesliga. I want to point out 2 matches that I will be watching out for this weekend. 1 point off of a Champions League spot, Borussia Dortmund will be taking on second place RB Leipzig. That game will be available on ESPN tomorrow morning, so be sure to check that out. 2 very good offensive-minded teams. Dortmund trying to fight their way into the Champions League. Remember, they got Erling Haaland, they got Jadon Sancho, who they've been talking about recently in terms of their summer plans. If they're able to get Champions League for next season, there's a good chance that they can hold on to both of those guys. Elsewhere, you've got Bayer Leverkusen. They will be taking on Josh Sargent and Werder Bremen. Bremen is just 1 point above FC Cologne, who are in that final relegation playoff spot. That's where Werder Bremen finished last season. They were able to win that playoff and avoid relegation. They don't want to be putting themselves in that same situation. So I'm hoping that they can come up with a point here versus a very tough Bayer Leverkusen team. So that Dortmund versus Leipzig match should be very entertaining. And yeah, rooting for Josh Sargent and co. at Werder Bremen to pick up a point at least, if not all 3, versus Bayer Leverkusen. Next, moving on to Serie A, where Inter Milan were able to clinch their first title in 11 years this past weekend after Atalanta drew 1-1 versus Sassuolo. It's their 19th league title, which puts them 1 above their rivals AC Milan as the second most successful club in league history behind Juventus. Congrats to Antonio Conte, former Chelsea manager. Everybody else over there at Inter Milan had a great season. That dynamic partnership between Romelu Lukaku and Lautaro Martinez helped lead them on the offensive end. And of course, Conte's tactics and brilliance there in terms of defensive prowess was able to help out on that end. So they were able to get things done. They didn't start off all that well. AC Milan got off to that great start, but at the end of the day, it's not how you start, it's how you finish, and Inter ended up being the most dominant team this season in Serie A. The other big news in Italy this week was AS Roma announcing the appointment of Jose Mourinho as club manager beginning next season. Mourinho signed a 3-year contract with the Italian club. Remember, he was sacked on April 19th as Tottenham manager. So Mourinho didn't have to wait that long to find a new club, and a big club at that. Roma have been a pretty successful club over the years in Serie A. They've had opportunities in the Champions League. It doesn't look like they're going to finish in one of those spots this season. It looks like they're headed once again for the Europa League. But still, it's a big opportunity for Mourinho. Obviously, he had success in Serie A a few years ago with Inter Milan, but it's been a pretty long time. And obviously, over these past few tenures at these different clubs, Mourinho has left on a sour note. So we'll see. Again, I'm not a big believer in Mourinho these days, but he does have big match prowess. He does have a lot of experience, and he was successful at one point in Serie A. So we'll have to see what he can do with Roma next season. And real quickly from League One from this past weekend, in a match that finished with 5 players receiving red cards, AS Monaco dropped points in a 3-2 loss versus Lyon. Monaco were near the top of the table in League One, but due to this loss and setback, probably means that they are out of the League One title race. This match had a ton of excellent goals, but of course the main thing was the skirmish post-match. We saw 4 additional players receive a red card. Obviously, frustrations boiling over there for Monaco, who were really in it here till the end. but that loss pretty much takes them out of the race. Lille still at the top of the table, ahead by, I believe, 1 point over PSG still. We'll have to see how PSG reacts to being eliminated from the Champions League, and if they can finish out the season strong and take a hold once again of that League One title, or if Lille will be able to finish their magical season and be the new champions of France. All right, let's talk some soccer in America, and we got to start off, of course, with the disappointing finish to the CONCACAF Champions League quarterfinals. MLS will have one lone representative in the semifinals, and that will be the Philadelphia Union, who were able to hold on for a 1-1 draw in the second leg versus Atlanta United FC and advance 4-1 on aggregate. They already had that big lead from the first leg, so they just had to do what was necessary here to get that result and move on to the semifinals. I know they started off slow in MLS, but they look pretty good here in this tournament. But they're going to have to look even better because they are MLS's lone representative because of what happened to the other three clubs. Cruz Azul got another brilliant goal from Brian Angulo, which was enough to beat Toronto FC 1-0 in the second leg and advance 4-1 on aggregate. Monterrey got 2 early goals from Maxi Meza, which helped lead them to a 3-0 thumping of Columbus Crew SC, who were eliminated 5-2 on aggregate. And lastly, Club America were the benefactors of a questionable penalty call, which aided them in their 3-1 victory over Portland Timbers, who were eliminated 4-2 on aggregate. So once again, we are back talking about MLS in CONCACAF Champions League and another disappointing performance. 3 of the 4 clubs eliminated here. Toronto never really got things going versus Cruz Azul. They had that terrible first leg, and they weren't really afforded much room in the second leg. Columbus, they were even pretty much with Monterrey in that first leg, but all of a sudden they come here in the second leg and they just get absolutely crushed. They had a terrible early start, and that's what kind of pegged them back, and they could never climb that hill once they got down early. And then Portland Timbers, yeah, again, I said questionable penalty call that definitely had something to do with Club America's success, but it was 2-1 shortly thereafter, and they had an opportunity, but Portland once again conceded another late goal, and that was pretty much that. So again, MLS, another disappointment here in the quarterfinals. We still got Philadelphia Union, but it's once again looking like Liga MX will have one up MLS here at the CONCACAF Champions League. Okay, so to cover some of the action from this past weekend in MLS, I thought I'd reinstitute a previous segment from one of my older episodes, and that would be trending up and trending down, taking a look at some of the teams and players who are trending up or trending down here in MLS through the first couple of weekends. So let's start off with who is trending up, and I got to start off with Seattle Sounders FC. They once again were able to put forth another dominating effort versus a top club in MLS this past weekend, beating the LA Galaxy 3-0 at home this past Sunday behind 2 goals, once again from Raul Ruiz-Diaz, who I believe is second in MLS with 4 goals to start the season. They just look tremendous. They look, once again, like one of the top contenders for the MLS Cup. Their offense has been fantastic, but also their defense. They actually have the second best record there. They've only conceded 1 goal, and they actually have the highest goal differential so far in the league at +7. So things are clicking once again in Seattle. In terms of the Western Conference, they've been able to go up against the Galaxy. They drew 1-1 with LAFC. And yeah, we'll talk a little bit about Minnesota here in a second, but it was a very convincing opening night win for Seattle there as well. So Seattle already looking like one of the top teams in MLS. Have had a great start to the season so far, definitely trending up. Up next, got to talk about Cade Cowell. The 17-year-old has been a revelation for the San Jose Earthquakes so far this season, contributing 2 goals and a league-leading 3 assists so far. San Jose currently hold the second spot in the Western Conference standings. This dude really came out of nowhere. I'm sure he kind of had a little bit of hype coming out from San Jose, but in terms of being on the national radar, I don't think he had gotten much hype going into the season, but he's been fantastic. He has helped lead that early resurgence for the Earthquakes to start this season, doing it in multiple different ways, scoring goals, contributing with assists, been doing some fantastic work there. Obviously, they've got Jackson Ewell in that midfield as well. And yeah, that's what's led to this early season success so far for San Jose. So really cool to see another young player make it to MLS and to contribute early on in his career. And looking forward to see what Cade can do here for the rest of the season. And lastly, on trending up, how about some USL Championship products? Former San Diego Loyal forward Rubio Rubin scored twice in Real Salt Lake's 3-1 win over Sporting Kansas City this past week. Elsewhere, former Indy 11 forward Tyler Pashner scored the equalizer in Houston Dynamo's 1-1 draw versus LAFC. So really cool to see that pathway USL up to MLS and to see players contribute immediately to their clubs. Pashner's had an excellent start to the season in Houston. This was his first goal, but he's also had a couple assists, I believe, so far to start the season. It's basically locked down a starting spot there with the Dynamo. Elsewhere, Ruben scoring 2 goals here, basically being the difference for Real Salt Lake, who have had a good start to the season. They weren't expected to do much, but they're near the top or maybe in the middle so far there in the standings to start the year. So again, really cool just to see some of those players get this opportunity to make the step up in their career, and they're performing spectacularly here early on to start the season. Now let's look at who is trending down in MLS, and I already mentioned them, Minnesota United FC. Having made the Western Conference Final last season, Minnesota have lost their first 3 matches of this season, and they're the only team in MLS who have not gotten a single point so far. It's been really bad. Emmanuel Reynoso, their top playmaker, has not scored a goal or contributed an assist so far this season. The defense is looking like it did when they first came up to MLS. They've conceded a ton of goals. They've gotten very little offense production, especially from a couple of strikers who they've brought in. They have not solved that problem there. Obviously, Reynoso off to a slow start. Things are looking pretty dicey there for Minnesota. It's a tough conference, the Western Conference. If you lose this much ground early on, it's going to be very tough to make it back up. Minnesota were expected to be big-time players, not just in the Western Conference, but in MLS as a whole. And it's been a terrible start. Not a single win yet. So we'll have to see if things can be improved, if they're going to have to do, an emergency sacking of their manager here to get them going. But they've lost a ton of ground already. And yeah, especially on the defensive end, they need to make a lot of improvements there. I expect the offense to improve and to get better here, but they're going to have to come up with some quick fixes in order to restart their season. My other trending down for this segment is actually a group of clubs, and that would be last year's Eastern Conference leaders. The top clubs in the East from last season, that would be the Philadelphia Union, Toronto FC, and Columbus Crew SC, all currently sit outside of playoff range, having combined for 0 wins and only 4 points so far this season. Now, I'm going to caveat it with this. All 3 of those clubs have been involved with the CONCACAF Champions League. That's obviously been a big focus for them. It's taken a lot out of them with matches in midweek and to the weekend. But still, these were the best clubs last season in the East. They've gotten off to terrible starts. We've seen Columbus not score as many goals as they did last season. Toronto, defensive issues. Philly, it's kind of been a combination of the two. But now that Columbus and Toronto are out of the CONCACAF Champions League, I expect them to pick things up here in the coming weeks. Philly's obviously got stuff to worry about going to the semifinals, but still interesting to see that they've gotten off to these very slow starts. They're all very talented clubs, a lot of great players. So we'll have to see if things improve, especially now for Columbus and Toronto now that they're out of the CONCACAF Champions League. But still, at least for the time being, they have not been up to what they've been able to do here over the past few seasons, especially last year. So they are trending down as of right now in MLS. All right, let's talk some women's soccer. I'm going to start off with the second leg of the semifinal of the Women's Champions League. A brace from Leaky Martins was enough for Barcelona as they were able to pull out a 2-1 victory over PSG and advance to their second Champions League final in 3 years on an aggregate score of 3-2. Elsewhere, Chelsea got late goals from Pernille Harder and Fran Kirby that were able to clinch a 4-1 victory over Bayern Munich and advance them to the final. This would be the first Champions League victory for either club, and Chelsea have the distinct pleasure of being the first club ever to have both their men's and women's teams make the final. So this is going to be really cool. Chelsea versus Barcelona here in the final. Nice to see some new blood getting their hands on the trophy after Lyon were able to win it the past 5 seasons. Going to be really cool. Obviously, Chelsea, they've got a lot of firepower with their big 3. You had Sam Kerr, Pernille Harder, Fran Kirby. Elsewhere for Barcelona, Jennifer Hermoso. She's been the top scorer in this tournament. So it's going to be really cool to see both these offenses go at it. With Chelsea, it's been all about, controlling mistakes at the back, being able to control possession, and also able to hit teams on the counterattack. We'll see if they'll be able to do it against the likes of Barcelona. But I'm very excited for this matchup. I think this will be really cool. And like I said, having someone new win the trophy brings even more importance to it. So again, happy for both clubs and interested to see who will come out on top. Well, speaking of Cup finals, with their 0-0 draw versus Racing Louisville FC this past Sunday, New Jersey New York Gotham FC clinched the top spot in Group East, setting up a showdown tomorrow at noon versus Portland Thorns FC in the NWSL Challenge Cup final. Both clubs avoided a loss in their 4-game schedule, with Portland Thorns actually drawing for the first time. They won their first 3 matches. They drew this past week 1-1 with the Houston Dash. So this is going to be a really cool matchup. Obviously, on one side, you've got Portland, who have been dominant so far this season. They've got all the pedigree and experience with all the big names, Crystal Dunn, Becky Sauerbrunn, Christine Sinclair. On the other side, you've got Gotham. They've got Carly Lloyd, and they've got a couple other players that maybe some people don't know about. Midge Purse has been on some fine form to start this season there. They've also got Jennifer Cujo, who's a great midfielder. If Gotham are able to control possession and kind of control the tempo of the match, I think they have a really good shot here. Pulling off the upset, I would consider them the underdog here in this matchup. But obviously, Portland have got all that talent and experience. I would favor them here, and that would be my pick. But this should be a very entertaining and close match between these two sides. I'm excited to see who can come out on top because this kind of sets the tone for the regular season coming up here in a couple of weeks as to who might be challenging there for the playoffs here at the end of the season. So again, very exciting. This match will be on CBS again tomorrow at noon. Very good opportunity for the NWSL to showcase two of the top teams in their league. Yeah, just hoping for a good match and a good conclusion to the Challenge Cup. And lastly, before I get to my guests, I want to wrap up with a couple of news stories from St. Louis soccer. And I thought this was really cool. A pair of St. Louis native goalkeepers made the team of the week this past week in their respective leagues, starting off in MLS with Nashville SC goalkeeper Joe Willis, who made a couple of spectacular saves early on and kept a clean sheet in a 0-0 draw versus Inter Miami CF. Elsewhere in the USL Championship, the Miami FC goalkeeper Connor Sparrow made 8 saves and helped lead his club to a 2-1 win versus Loudoun United FC. So really cool to see both these St. Louis goalkeepers had excellent matches this past weekend. With Willis, Nashville SC's early struggles can't be placed on him. He's been great in between the pipes. And then with Sparrow, first match of the season for the Miami FC, they were able to come up with a clutch win. I believe they played down a man for the majority of that match. So Sparrow having to come up with a lot of huge saves to get them all 3 points was very impressive. So good start there for a couple of St. Louis natives in their respective leagues. The other St. Louis soccer story would be SLU women's soccer team putting up a tremendous fight versus Washington in the second round of the NCAA tournament. But the Huskies would win in a penalty shootout 4-3 and advance to the next round. Heartbreaking loss for SLU. This match was tightly contested. It was 0-0 all the way through double overtime. It gets to that penalty kick shootout, and that's where SLU would be eliminated. A very tough end to the season. A lot of great players, a lot of great accomplishments this season for SLU. Head coach Katie Shields has built a tremendous program there, hoping that next year, with most of the talent returning, that they'll be able to take the next step and make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. But still, a lot to be proud of this season for SLU, and hopefully they come back even stronger next year. So for my guest this week, I've brought back Phil Grooms to talk a lot about the USL Championship and the first few weekends of the season, as well as some soccer news here in America and in St. Louis. Hope you enjoy. Well, I'm excited to welcome back to the program one of the hosts of the USL show, as well as one of the hosts of Flyover Footy, a guy who has tapped into what is going on with soccer here in this country and also in St. Louis. Phil Grooms, welcome back to the show, man.
Thanks, Josh. It's good to talk to you again, man. This is fun.
Exactly. I'm excited to get your opinions. Obviously, with the USL Championship season just starting up, there's a lot to get to on that front, but I want to start off with some local news here. You had the opportunity this past Saturday to go out to the St. Louis City SC Open Trials for their academy team. It was their third and final, official scheduling. I know there'll be one more additional trial, but this was the ones that they had announced. And I wanted to ask, obviously, you had a great conversation with Lutz, and I would encourage people to go check that out on Flyover Footy. So we don't have to get into too much of that there so people can tune in. But I want to ask your general impressions of what you thought of the trials and how they were conducted and just some of the things that you took away from your observations there.
Yeah, the trials themselves, it looked pretty much like I expected. You know, there was groups of kids. Some were kind of warming up, playing, with 4 tiny goals, just kind of messing around. But then we had like an 8-a-side game going that seemed to be kind of the center of everybody's attention. And it was cool to watch. You know, I thought there'd be a lot of guys. I've said this a few times, but I thought there'd be like a bunch of guys showing off, trying to, pull off techers in front of the coach. But it wasn't that. It was a lot of guys working together and trying to make a team. It seemed very mature, I guess, for, 17 and under for sure.
Yeah, I think that when I went, and obviously, the weather was a different issue when I went as opposed to this past week. And although you guys had to deal with some wind, it sounded like with everybody's broadcast. But I think that when they said open, you don't really know what that means. And they were truly like open trials in terms of who all showed up and what all they were conducted and some of the drills that they were doing. And I kind of liked that. It wasn't exactly, an intense affair where people really, pushing to try to make these teams. This is all about an introductory thing, kind of just getting your face out there and seeing what people can do. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. Obviously, things will get more intense once they start picking guys and starting to focus on forming that team. But I really enjoyed the openness of it. I guess I didn't know really what to expect on that front, but I was pleasantly surprised at least.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lutz said he didn't know what to expect either, because that's not something they do in Germany. So that's a nice American style thing. I didn't see everyone getting there, but I did see some kids come in late, and it was just what you'd expect. You'd see the coach kind of, Twelman be like, "Hey guys, welcome, go grab some shirts and warm up over there." It's just very classic American tryout.
Yeah, it's really cool. Again, also just that it seems like everybody's in tune to this process and everybody's interested in continuing to cover it. It's not something that we're used to here in this town in terms of this intensive process. So it's really good to see the first few stages of it. Want to get into some news that you broke specifically, because if the Euro Super League thing did not happen, you actually broke the biggest news in soccer the week of that you did it. So I feel pretty bad for you on that front, but this has to do with the US Open Cup. A few weeks ago, you broke the news that the tournament was once again going to be postponed to a later date, a little bit later on this year. They're still going to have a rendition of it, but it's just not going to be the same. I know you had a conversation with someone a little bit about it. I just wanted to ask as a follow-up, because although that this tournament's still going to happen, at least for the most part, it seems like, in terms of the postponement from last year, not having it this year, the multiple postponements and the different rendition of it, are you a little bit concerned further on down the line about the status of this tournament?
No. Well, so first I'll say it looks like it probably won't happen. I did a terrible job announcing it in that the way I phrased it made it sound like this is canceled. And then maybe it's not canceled later is kind of the way I phrased it. So I didn't do a great job there, but it's probably not happening is what I meant to kind of say, is that there would be a lot of luck involved, and COVID would have to go really well, which it does seem like it is going very well all of a sudden. But, you know, the Open Cup just doesn't have the resources, and I'll even emphasize it doesn't have the desire to push hard enough to make it a competition that I think is going to absolutely happen this year. So I'll give it like a 20% chance of happening this year, only because COVID's doing that well, and I would otherwise give it like 5% chance of happening. But, you know, that's the problem with the Open Cup in the United States. It's the second oldest open soccer competition in the world, right? Second to Northern Ireland, I found out in the research for this announcement. And it's not well run. It's not something that has money in it, which means that Americans aren't going to put a lot of time and effort into it, basically, is the short of it. We could go on about that forever. But, you know, you mentioned, I talked to Josh Hakala, who's been working tirelessly on the Open Cup for years. And so we talked about that. And that was kind of the main idea that we came out with, that just, it's not cared enough. There's not enough money. Therefore, it's not going to happen until money comes in for the most part.
And my problem with it has been, like, if an average soccer fan came up to me and said, like, what's the Open Cup? The easiest thing would be to say is, oh, this is our version of the FA Cup, right? Basically, the top teams in our country versus teams from other different divisions. It's a variety. It's an opportunity for smaller clubs to play against bigger clubs. And at the end of the day, even though, like, over in England, the FA Cup has lost a little bit of its luster, as you get further on to it, some upsets happen, and then you get to Wembley in the semifinals and finals. It's a big deal still to some people. So I guess I wonder why, I guess maybe in your talkings with some people, why is there a disconnect from how the FA Cup or some of these other cups in other countries are operated versus this? Because if there's an opportunity, we've seen the CONCACAF Champions League here this week get some pretty nice coverage. Obviously, Fox has taken control of that. Where's the disconnect when it comes to the Open Cup?
Well, I think it's just an example of there didn't used to be that much time and effort put into even MLS 5 years ago. You know what I mean? And USL is just now starting to get its feet under it. You know, how long has it been that they've been on ESPN Plus? And before that, YouTube. And then before that, Lord, it was hard to find a stream for Open Cup, especially. So what happened? It became organized, and money's been coming in, and it's been growing, and it's been growing in popularity. So as soccer grows, I think in the next 10, 20 years, hopefully we get like an average to medium advertiser to join in and just pour some money into this event, and it'll become a little bigger. But, you know, until it's someone really, really big, I don't think anything big is going to come of it. But I do think it has a chance to do that in the future. And I think, like you mentioned, it's like the FA Cup, and it absolutely is. To a soccer person, that's what you should compare it to. But Josh Hakala, who I mentioned about the Open Cup, the cup.us, he mentioned it's kind of like the NCAA tournament, and it could be as big as March Madness because, you, like you mentioned, you have the idea of the giant killer situation. It's kind of even more that, because this is the top pro teams versus the bottom, you know, the best of the semi-pro. Not even professional soccer players can make a dent in that tournament still. So it's really cool, and it could be something giant, and hopefully someday it will be, because I love that competition.
All right, let's jump into some USL Championship talk. And obviously, we're only a couple weekends into the season, but really, even before we got started, we had some weird drama coming out from different clubs. And I thought to bring you in to add some perspective, if you've talked with anybody who could add some thoughts to this. What the heck happened with Oakland and with Louisville in terms of the coaching changes that happened there, especially with John Hackworth? I know the speculation has been out there, and it seems like everyone has the somewhat similar opinion that he will be moving up somewhere. I don't know if there's been any developments on that front, but still, what do you make of the early coaching changes at those two clubs?
I'd say both were unexpected, even by the insiders. Even the insiders I've talked to were like, whoa, we did not see this coming. And I think that goes to show that neither one was necessarily planned. I think something happened. Now, the communications departments have done a very good job with those clubs, as they tend to do. They're good organizations. So we haven't actually gotten a lot of information about what happened. But I did talk to Devin Kerr on the USL show, and he did mention that the players are extremely unhappy in Oakland. And so it's very clear something's going on there. And again, actually, we can also connect that to at some point they got rid of one of their owners in Oakland, and there was some drama there. He sued them after that situation happened. And so, this coach, from what I've gathered, is kind of perhaps a holdover to that old owner. And so if something bad happened, we don't know exactly what it is. We know it wasn't good, and we know that Oakland's trying to nip it in the butt and keep it quiet. You know what I mean? So I think the best thing to do with Oakland is, it's kind of nice that no one's freaking the heck out about this to any crazy extent. Let's just watch that organization and see if they continue to improve that situation and keep it under wraps and hopefully solve it. And so Oakland, great organization. We know hopefully they can get rid of that. The Hackworth thing, I think was like, it was sudden for him. He has no plans on going anywhere right now. Now, I'm sure he has some offers. I think I've heard that he's had some very, very good offers. But right now, there's no announcements. He had no plans on going anywhere. He just exited the organization. And he did also at the same time mention a non-disclosure agreement. So there it is. That's all we know for now, at least publicly.
Yeah, it's just a weird thing because mostly focused on the Hackworth situation because Oakland, we're still kind of learning about their operation. But in terms of him, in terms of maybe being unhappy with the front office, I can kind of understand maybe they did lose a couple guys in the offseason who've been a big part of their success over the past few years. But they've been at the top for the USL since they've entered, essentially. So in terms of, not being successful or anything like that, he can't be happy about that. So I'm interested to see, down the road if we ever get to know what truly happened there. But yeah. Quite an interesting start to the season, but eventually, of course, we got it on the field. And there have been some interesting results. I want to talk to you first off about the first nationally televised match in the USL Championship this season. That was Phoenix Rising FC versus San Diego Loyal this past Friday night. Phoenix crushed them 4-1, opening of their brand new stadium. Dadazov and Asante didn't even get on the score sheet, and they still were able to put past 4 goals. So I want to ask you, is it more so about, opening night, new stadium, Friday night kind of jitters? Did we kind of overrate San Diego Loyal a little bit, or is Phoenix possibly even better than they were last season?
Well, first of all, so far I look like an idiot. I look like I way overrated San Diego Loyal. I think in my recent power rankings, I dropped them 5 spots to number 8. So I had them extremely high because they finished so strong. Phoenix, on the other hand, typically starts slow. And so if I were to pick this game, I might have even picked San Diego just because of those two things right there. But San Diego did not look good. They did not look organized. Part of that I've heard in the game, they were talking about how one of the center backs came in like that week. And so they're not organized yet. They do have a lot of new guys that have come in who just haven't acclimated. It's very clear they just didn't know each other yet. And so I'm not giving up on San Diego. My power rankings are very reactionary this year, so I dropped them 5 for now. I think they'll work their way up and get better throughout the season. Phoenix, on the other hand, usually they start slow, like I said. They're starting super hot. New stadium, like you said. Who knows if that's like a one-game thing or if it's going to continue. But you said it there that Asante didn't get on the scoreboard, and they were fine. That is, to me, the secret for Phoenix is can they continue to rebuild and feature different guys every year. Junior Flemings is gone, obviously, this year for them as well. So looks like they're doing good in that so far. And if it continues through the season, they're going to be a very, very dangerous team.
Yeah, I mean, I expected, Phoenix to be great again this season, but in terms of just the in-your-face nature of it, yeah, San Diego, I think the biggest problem with them was they got pegged back so far in their own end. They could not find a way to get out. Whenever they got on the ball, it would be a turnover, and Phoenix would become right again. So it was very eye-opening. Again, nationally televised matches are always going to get over-criticized just a little bit, but still, I thought that was very eye-opening here in the initial parts of the season. But, of course, there were a bunch of other matches, and some have played 2 so far, but most played their first match this last weekend. And I want to ask you either for 1 or 2 clubs that stood out to you a little bit and who impressed you the most here in the opening weekend.
Oh man, let's see here. Phoenix was one of those. Louisville did not impress me, and they had a game with Hackworth, so it's not related to that. That happened after that first game. They didn't look incredible, and so I was a little disappointed in that. Someone I'm excited about is San Antonio FC, whose attack. Get a lot of debates with Harry down in San Antonio, who's all over the internet. If you haven't seen him at Remencall on Twitter. He's really big on them this year, and I worried about their defense, but they returned their defense. In this last game, they won 3-0, and I thought their attack was going to be incredible, and I was worried about their defense. He was worried about the opposite, and we were both wrong. They scored 3 goals, looked great in the attack, and they defended out, did a great job against a Colorado Springs who's a totally different, totally new regime. Lots of new players, so that's not a huge surprise. I'm not sold on that necessarily, but gosh, they looked even better than I expected. The next one is Tulsa FC. Tulsa's a fun team because if you liked St. Louis FC, hello, there's a few St. Louis players down there, and they're kind of similar. Like, they have some really high-profile players. They have a lot of blue-collar worker type players, and they're not like super high-end like Phoenix or San Diego. I'm sure their salaries are somewhere in the middle upper tier, just like St. Louis was. And so they're a fun team to watch. I didn't expect a ton from them this year because they loaded up last year pretty good, and I was a little disappointed. I thought they'd do even better. This year they loaded up some more, and they've looked incredible so far. Not just attacking. Rivas is Joaquin Rivas has been having some games for himself, but they defended nicely in the last game and played very practical, direct soccer. So that'll be a fun one to watch for sure is Tulsa FC.
I'm glad you brought them up. That was the main team that I wanted to talk about because, again, I still remember when they came into St. Louis, it was last year, a couple seasons ago, and they basically controlled that match. I can remember the St. Louis FC players being extremely frustrated with the tactics and just not being able to break them down. I believe they beat us 2-0. And then, of course, this past weekend, they beat Sporting KC 2-0. They beat the rivals, OKC Energy, the first week. Joaquin had those 2 goals. So, yeah, they've been very impressive, and they got a nice group there with DaCosta. Eric Bird's a nice midfielder. Who I really like to watch. So, again, I'm impressed with them. Another team I'll just mention, Tampa Bay Rowdies. I know they're going to be really good this year, and they had a really great second half, albeit when Lewis Hilton was entered onto the field. So keep that in mind. But, Guanzati has been one of the best, offensive players the past few years in the USL, and him to get that start to this season, they're going to be a top contender again. But I think that what they were able to do in that second half versus Charlotte, I thought was pretty impressive. So that kind of leads into, you mentioned a little bit your power rankings in terms of who you got near the top right now. We talked a little bit about Phoenix as being one of those top teams and Tampa Bay. Who are some of those other possible top teams that you got up there right now?
Yeah, Tampa Bay, Phoenix, Louisville, I got 3rd. Pittsburgh, of course. Bob Lilly, any team that Bob Lilly's in charge of is going to make a dent in some people in the season. Indy 11's an interesting team. They got AJ Cochran from St. Louis there, of course, and they reloaded a lot, and I've been worried about them. But they're so solid defensively, and they always are, right? That I think even if they have to kind of figure out the attack for several weeks, they're going to be fine throughout the season. So I got them nice and high. Some 2 that I didn't get to mention that are 2 of my favorites. The rest I've mentioned today. At the bottom at 9 and 10, I've got Birmingham and OC. Birmingham's another team like Tulsa that's going to be kind of like a St. Louis style team, and in the same salary range I would expect, but just have some stunners in the attack and all over especially down the spine. We got Fanuel Kavita there from St. Louis FC, a very good center back. He's been the highest rated center back for them so far this season. So they're a fun one to watch. OC sent Aiden Quinn to Phoenix, and so that's going to be an interesting one. He's been one of the best defensive midfielders in the league for years now, especially under the banner of OC. And so Orange County, I think, is going to be interesting to watch, but they always defend well. They've got Orozco, as the famous USMNT center back, is finishing his career there, and he's still very solid. So, they've always been good at the back. They've brought in so many good strikers, some known and some unknown, that I'm really excited to watch as well. So OC is the last team that I kind of threw in there just because they seem very interesting and have a good history of good coaching, good system. They have an affiliation with the Rangers where it's 2-way player movement, not just, guys coming over from Europe and us not sending anyone. So they're a really fun, exciting team to watch.
Yeah, I like it. I think that, obviously we're 2 Midwestern guys here, and they'll say, oh, there's some bias, but these teams are really tough. You mentioned all of them, Louisville, Indy, Birmingham. They're all got a really good defensive backbone. They're just going to play a very tough, aggressive style. It's going to mess with some clubs. But then I think at the end of the day, if you're looking at elsewhere for successful teams, pick a coast, right? I mean, basically as far west as you can go or as far east as you can go, that's where you're going to find the top clubs. But again, still early on in the season. Phil, but since obviously we had a lot of teams already play their first match, we actually have a lot that will be debuting here for this season. We actually have 6 teams this upcoming weekend who have not played yet in a match. A lot of good options. I wanted to ask who you're looking forward to most from that group who haven't played yet in the USL Championship here this weekend.
I think it's Orange County. I'm sorry to kind of repeat there, but yeah, they haven't played a game yet, and I'm really interested to see what they have to offer once they play this upcoming weekend here.
Cool. I'll mention Oakland, obviously, just not just because of the drama, but because, Wallfall, Tyler Blackwood, excited to see what they can do there. Pittsburgh, same situation. We got 2 guys there, Todd Wharton, Russell Sterling, and Albert Equa. I also should mention former St. Louis FC player. But again, just like you said, they're supposed to be one of the top teams in the league. And I'll throw out a personal favorite, actually, El Paso. I really like what they do down there. They were very close last season in the playoffs to advancing. And also, again, just as a Bradley University alum, Logan Kerrer, I think, has been one of the top goalkeepers in the league for the past couple of years, formerly with the Crew in MLS. Again, just kind of cool to see him with his career and kind of develop. So I kind of have a special place there for El Paso. Excited to see what they can do this season. Lastly, though, in terms of not just the team, but the match, I think there's a lot of big matches this weekend. Obviously, it's still early in the season, but there could be a lot of big-time matchups here, potential late playoff matchups. Wanted to ask, looking at the schedule, maybe some matches that intrigue you here.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the schedule right now. It looks like Indy 11 and FC Tulsa. I've been looking forward to that one for a couple weeks now because exactly like we want to see where these guys will stand. Tulsa was in the West last year, and they're used to playing an open style against open teams. Now they're going to face an Eastern style, blockaded in the back, very tight, very defensive. Can they break down that structure? That will be really interesting to watch. Birmingham Legion, Louisville will be interesting. I'm really worried about Oakland. You mentioned you're excited to watch them. I am too for those guys, but with the coaching change, they had 0 wins in the preseason. That one might get ugly. But yeah, also, of course, Tampa Bay Rowdies, Riverhounds. I mean, that could be quite the battle there. So those are some good ones for sure.
Well, great minds think alike. Those are the 3 that I wanted to focus on. Yeah, I think that for all the excitement, obviously, like you said, it doesn't get any harder than playing Phoenix in your first ever league match. And obviously, the whole head coaching thing is added on to it. And then, yeah, I think Tulsa, for the most part, I'm not trying to knock Sporting KC or Oklahoma Energy, but in terms of Indy 11 and the style that they play, it's very much a like-for-like grit type of matchup. And the defense they've shown so far, it's kind of been cool to see. We kind of had a back and forth about Tyler Pastor in MLS so far and how successful he has been. But Indy have done good so far. But again, still looking to see how the offense develops with the loss of Pastor this season. So this will be a good test to see how far they've come with that. And then, yeah, Rowdies Pitt. I mean, that's going to be a high-level matchup here, I think, in the playoffs. And again, Tampa Bay is very much an offensive-minded team. Pittsburgh begins with their defense and eventually transitions to their offense. It's going to be very exciting to see how those 2 match up early on. But, yeah, very exciting schedule slate here coming up in the USL Championship. We're looking out for that. And then, yeah, I think they're back on national television, I think, next week. I think Tampa Bay is playing somebody, but I have to go look and check. But, yeah, again, very good start to the season. Phil, I'm going to let you go here, but I also just want to mention again, I saw the USL show a couple weeks ago, your conversation with Mike Watts and Devin Kerr. Very, very cool. In terms of your most recent episode and going forward, tell us a little bit about what you're working on.
Oh, I actually have. So we mentioned the coaching transfer over. I've got Danny Cruz as the interim coach for Louisville. And so he's someone that everyone is super, I almost wrote there's like this aura around the mentioning of Danny Cruz. Anyone who knows him, who talks about him, seems like a super nice guy. I've been wanting to talk up to him for a long time, and now it looks like I'll get the chance. So hopefully next Thursday I'll have that interview out
very
on the USL show.
I think that part of the Hackworth story, as much as it maybe has died off, is because of the faith people have in Cruz to take over Louisville. So I'm interested to see what you do there. Also heard you'll be getting back together with the guys at Flyover Footy. Excited to see what you do with that. Obviously, a lot of soccer to talk about here as we get into the summer. So, Phil, thanks so much for joining me again for this week's show, and good luck here with your work going forward.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
My thanks to Phil for joining me on the show once again. That'll do it for this episode of the Gateway to Soccer Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Going to be a lot of great matchups to recap on next week's episode. A lot of St. Louis soccer is coming up. I hope to get to all of it there next week. So again, Have a great weekend. Enjoy all the soccer. I'll be right back here next week. Thanks again.